Most of us want to be happy, at peace, fulfilled. Most of us don't want to be frustrated, sad, upset, hurt. And some of the reasons why we are in a state of these negative things is because we blame other people for making us feel that way. And as long as we're blaming other people for any condition of how we are doing inside, we're saying to ourselves, maybe without knowing it, but anyway, we're hoping, and in some cases we're even trying to change those people. So as long as I believe somebody hurt my feelings, I'm also going to believe that that person ought to have not done that, whatever it was that I decided hurt my feelings, or that in the future that person ought not to do it again. In other words, I'm hoping to change them. As long as I'm hoping to change other people, and then if they don't change, then now I'm going to experience all these negative things internally. These are called blaming emotions, or assigning the impetus of our emotions to other people. So I can continue to walk in a world where I believe that other people need to change. Another option is I can change my theory about people. Now, what does it mean to have a theory about people? First of all, let's establish this. All of us are theorizers. We have a particular view, and then we walk around in life confirming that view. It's called confirmation bias, actually. And as long as our view is strong enough, we will find things to observe in other people to support the view that we already have. Now, there is a very interesting, deep way of actually looking at this whole situation. And I want to bring up two scientists, some of which many of you may be familiar with, one of which especially. And together they said something that I have found very interesting, having to do with this concept of either seeking to change other people or seeking to change my theory. One is Albert Einstein. Most of us know quite a bit about him. Just to summarize, he's the recipient of the 1921 Nobel Prize in Physics for discovering the law of the photoelectric effect, and helped develop the quantum theory in its infancy. And he's the originator of the theory of relativity. Quantum mechanics, modern physics, all that are based largely upon Albert Einstein's work. And in 1929, he's the recipient of the Max Planck Medal. Okay, well, who's Max Planck then? Max Planck, he's the recipient of the 1918 Nobel Prize in Physics, so a little bit before Albert Einstein was. And then he was also the winner of the Max Planck Medal. Max Planck was the first recipient of the Max Planck Medal. And then Albert Einstein got it a couple years later. So Max Planck was the originator of quantum physics and the establisher of the third law of thermodynamics. I don't even understand that necessarily. All I know is Max Planck was the progenitor, the father of a lot of what we consider physics today. And there's a lot going on these days in theoretical physics and metaphysics, if you will. And these two guys together, without knowing it necessarily, helped contribute to today's view of what people can do when they put their mind to it. People can do when they seek to change their lives. And a lot of it runs really deep, and we can all profit from understanding the principles that, among other people, these two introduced to the world. So one of the things that Albert Einstein said is, it's the theory which decides what we can observe. So think of it this way, we're all theorizers, and it's the theory, again to quote Einstein, it's the theory which decides what we can observe. So in other words, my specific assumptions and theory about people decides what I'm able to observe about them. What I hold up as a theory controls what I'm capable of then turning around and observing. Now, he was speaking specifically about how subatomic particles change when scientists use different mechanisms to seek to observe them. And they found that they changed fundamentally, whether it be being a wave of energy or a particle, which is a pretty fundamental difference, by the way. These super tiny things, photons, electrons, other subatomic particle type things, will change as scientists seek to observe them in different ways. And they have found, since these two guys have long since gone, that the deeper you go, the smaller the particles are, the more wacky and crazy are the ways in which they do show up differently depending on how scientists seek to observe them. So scientists seek to observe these things by starting with the theory. Okay, here's the theory. We're going to see this particular thing. Let's try to observe it. And then they create experiments, and then the observation of it either comes to fruition, the theory is proved, or they keep working to prove that theory. They called the Higgs boson the God particle, the fundamental particle of basically all things. And they looked for it for years and years and years, and finally found it a few years ago. So they confirmed a theory that a lot of people had, for example. So Einstein, it's the theory which decides what we can observe. If I have a theory that my neighbor is a jerk, and I've come to that theory by reasons that make sense to me. Perhaps my neighbor reminds me of the neighbor that I grew up around at my parents' house who was a jerk. And this neighbor reminds me of that person. So if my theory is my neighbor is a jerk, all of my observations that I have from then on will confirm to me that that neighbor is a jerk. Even if they do something that might be nice, I might see it as, well, now they're being manipulative or something like that. And I could apply that to my spouse, to my children, to my boss, to everybody in my life, particular theories about all these people, and sometimes overarching theories about all people. And people will confirm that to me in traffic, at church, at work, in my neighborhood, all the time. And people will ask me maybe, how are you doing? And a trail of complaints might come out of my mouth about the different people in my life. And somebody might sit back and listen to that and go, oh, wow, all these people, yeah, I could see how this person's problematic and this person's problematic and that other person's problematic. Or somebody could think, you definitely got a theory about people. And your theory is being proven out over and over and over. Well, as Einstein, one of the preeminent scientists of all time, not just our time, based on seeking to observe the most fundamental things about life, says it is the theory which decides what we can observe. Now, this is pretty crazy. I mean, you'd think you'd go outside and look around and you're observing things, and now you know what those things are. Well, what he's saying is, You walk outside, and first you have a theory, things you're comparing to in your previous experience, whatever it may be. You have a theory, and it's deciding for you what it is you're actually observing, and then turning around and reacting to. Because somebody might go out their front door and observe a beautiful rainy day where all the plants and the grass are getting the water that they need. Somebody else could walk out and observe a crappy day. And both will have confirmation as to why their theory is true. All right, now we're going to go to Max Planck. And remember, he was a big deal, and Einstein was the recipient of the Max Planck Medal. Max Planck said this: when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. Now, Wayne Dyer used to, towards the end of his career, used to quote that all the time. When you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change. And so, again, it's a very simple statement, but when we change our theory, when we change the way we look at things, those things change. So when I walk outside and I've changed my theory about what a rainy day is, it used to suck, and now, oh my gosh, all these plants are getting water. This is great. Since I changed the way I look at things, the things I look at change. It changed into a beautiful day. And it can get more nuanced and more complicated than that, or more complex than that. Meaning, what would happen if I changed the way I look at my father? What would happen if I changed the way I look at my mother? What would happen if I changed the way I look at my kids? What would happen if I changed the way I looked at my boss? All the people that I interact with in life. What would happen if I changed my way of being such that now I have a new theory? Suddenly, I would be able to observe a completely different array of things. We understand this about the very most fundamental aspects of our universe, far more now than they ever did back in the day of Einstein and Planck. But they knew the fundamental concept. One, it's my theory that absolutely dictates what I'm able to even observe at all. And then Max Planck, when you change the way you look at things, or when you change the way you observe, the things that you observe change. So I can either seek to try to get people to change their behavior, which malaffects me so that I can feel better, or I can seek to change my theory. And when I change my theory, happiness is available to me more profoundly than when I try to change people. So one, my specific assumptions theory about people decides what I'm able to observe about them. And two, when I change my way of being, or when I change how I look at them, then they change to me. Now here's something that can get a little bit, maybe can even run a little bit crazier or deeper. When I change the way I look at people, people change to me. But do they also actually change? Does the little particle actually change into a wave? Well, the physics experiment would say yes. When I change the way that I see my pestering neighbor, does that person actually change beyond just changing to me? I might see him differently, but does that mean they're a different person? That is where we don't know. But what I do know is that if I change the way I look at someone instead of seeking to make them change, if I change the way I look at them and they change as pertaining to my view of them, I, for the first time, in terms of their experience of me, have an invitation from me to make changes. Not because I tried to get them to change, but because I changed my view of them. I changed my theory of them. This is one of the most fundamental ideas in what you could call the relational model as opposed to the behavioral model in working with people, children, just other people in life. I can either try to get them to change or I can change how I see them. And then how I see them is an invitation to them to do what they want to do with that. And often it helps them see life differently. In other words, it helps them modify their own theory, and then now they get a change. So it's really real. My theory decides what I can observe, and if I change the way I look at things, the things I look at change. And maybe for real, they really do change. And even if they don't, my experience of them releases from them the insistence that they do change. And then it goes back to the same thing. I can be more at peace. I can be happier. I can be more joyful. I can be less hurt when I change my theory. And then now all my confirmation bias goes the other way, goes the positive way. Well, that person must be having a tough day. What can I do for them? As opposed to that person is a jerk. So there you go. It is, this could be called the Planck-Einstein Generalized Theory of Human Organic Relationodynamics, or PEGTHOR if you want an acronym. Some of these things can sound so complicated, and it's really just about changing how I seek to see other people. And it's my way of being that has then made this fundamental foundational change in the world around me. My way of being. Change the whole world around me. There you go.